Okay, so let's move on to commas that separate independent clauses. This is probably the most complex of the three things we need to cover, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy. So there is a comma rule that you need to place a comma before a coordinating conjunction when it joins two independent clauses. That is the rule. So the thing that becomes confusing about that is A, what is a coordinating conjunction? And B, what is an independent clause? Well, let's attack the coordinating conjunction first. It might be more familiar to you as the fanboys acronym. It's just for and nor, but, or, yet, and so. Coordinating means that they are linking two things of equal rank. So in this case, they're going to be two independent clauses. They're the same thing, so they rank equally. And conjunction means that they link things. So these are just words that link things of equal rank. And all you have to do is remember the acronym is fanboys, and these are the fanboys. Write it down. I think we have a poster in Mrs. Jeffries' class that has them. So just memorize it. It's the fanboys. These are the coordinating conjunction. Now, what is an independent clause? An independent clause is a clause that can stand by itself as a simple sentence. It needs to contain a subject, and it needs to contain a predicate, and it needs to make sense by itself. So I've got an example down here. My mom bought some flowers. So we have the subject as my mom, and the predicate is bought some flowers. So we have my mom being the person who is going to do something, and then the thing they are doing. That's what predicate means, the thing that was done. That is a full independent clause. Independent meaning it can stand by itself. It makes sense on its own. This is important because there are other things called dependent clauses that can't stand by themselves. This is an example of one. Depending on the time of day. Okay, what depends on the time of day? We don't have a subject there. Like, your class depends on the time of day. My mood depends on the time of day. What? So that can't stand on its own. It doesn't make sense by itself. It depends on something else. So that would be a dependent clause. But remember, our rule is that you must place a comma before a coordinating conjunction, so the fanboys, when it joins two of those independent clauses, those things that have both a subject and a predicate and can stand by themselves. So that's the rule. That's what we're going to look at, and that's what you guys seem to be forgetting. So here's what that looks like visually. You've got an independent clause over here, a comma, one of the fanboys, and then another independent clause. So here's how I like to diagram it. You've got the subject, in this case, the climbers, must reach the summit today. That's the predicate that goes with this. The fanboy in this case is or, which is the O in boy. Subject, they, and then another predicate will have to turn back. So this is all one sentence, but you could chop this up into an independent clause, a fanboy, and another independent clause. So we must have the comma right there to separate out the independent clauses and just stick the fanboy in with the second independent clause. That's all we need. That's what's happening. That's the whole rule. You guys are just forgetting that this comma exists. The cheat code here is, do you have a full sentence on either side of the fanboy? So in this case, the climbers must reach the summit today, or they will have to turn back. That's the full original sentence. But you could split this up into the climbers must reach the summit today, and they will have to turn back. Both of these make sense as a sentence on their own. So if you take out this comma or and make them their own sentences, they still make sense. If that is the case, if you can take out that comma fanboys and they make sense as their own sentences, you've got to use a comma. That's the rule. That's your cheat code. If you can split it up and they make sense as their own sentences, minus the comma fanboy, you've got to put a comma there. And you can do this with any of the fanboys. Remember, the fanboys are for and nor, but, or, yet, so. So I must see him tonight, comma, for I fear he shall die soon. There is a sentence here. I must see him tonight. That's a sentence. I fear he shall die soon. That's a sentence. I opened the junk drawer. That's a sentence. The cabinet door jammed. That's a sentence. Joined by and. We won't go to the movie tonight. That's a sentence. We shall go to dinner. That's a sentence. Nor is interesting, and I know we don't use nor a lot, but it's the negative version of or. So if you read the whole sentence, it's we won't go to the movies tonight, nor shall we go to dinner. It means they're not going to go to dinner, if that was confusing to anybody. I want to go to the game. That's a sentence. I have to do my homework. That's a sentence. Joined by but. I want to go to the game, but I have to do my homework. Do you get the hang of this? If you've got a sentence on both sides that you are joining with these fanboys, you have to have a comma after that first sentence, that independent clause, to chop it up, to show that they're separate. All right, there is a rule exception, because there always has to be a rule exception. If the independent clauses are very, very, very short, you can get away with not adding a comma. These are it's very hard to tell, and if you are having a hard time with it, please come talk to Mrs. Calajanan, Mrs. Jeffries, or myself, and we will help you figure out if you need to have a comma in your sentence or not. But this is an example of where that would be the case. I'll go this way and you go that way. You go that way is a sentence, and I'll go this way is a sentence, but because they're so short, it would actually be more confusing to add the comma. So the style guide does say that you don't need a comma there. However, if this is going to trip you up, don't worry about it. Just come talk to us. I get that this is hard. And another thing to be careful of is you don't want to separate their subjects from their verbs. Now, what I mean by that is that the subject of the sentence, the person or thing that is doing the stuff, cannot be separated from the verb that says what they're doing. So again, think of a comma as separation. Dave is doing some giving, and in this sentence, he's doing the gotting. So Dave gave me some good advice and got some from me in return. Look at this. Dave is both doing some giving and he's doing some gotting. You cannot put a comma there because you cannot separate Dave from got. I know you might want to put a comma right there between advice and, but you cannot. You've got to have got and Dave stick together because you can't separate a subject from its verb. And if you think about it, it doesn't make sense with our cheat code. Dave gave me some good advice. And then the other sentence would be, got some from me in return. That doesn't make sense. Use your cheat code. Got some from me in return? Well, who got some from you in return? That's not a full sentence. Wait, did a bunny get some from you in return? What did they get from you in return? Got some from me in return isn't a full sentence, so you don't put a comma there. But if the sentence was this instead, Dave gave me some good advice, comma, and I gave him some in return, then look at our cheat code. I gave him some in return. There is an I, and then there is a gave. I gave. I am doing the gaving here, so those are sticking together on the same side of the comma. That works. And I gave him some in return is a sentence that makes sense. And Dave is still with gave, so Dave is doing the gaving. That makes sense. Dave gave me some good advice. That's a sentence. I gave him some in return. That's a sentence. That works with our cheat code. Another thing I'm seeing you guys doing that goes along with this, comma splices are bad. You cannot join two independent clauses with only a comma. It's called a comma splice. It's an error. You get points marked off. So, choosing a camera is difficult. There are so many on the market. This is wrong. You see how there's a comma here, but you forgot the fanboy. So there's a couple ways to fix it. Choosing a camera is difficult, for there are so many on the market. That would fix it because you need to have that coordinating conjunction. Or you could go with something else. You could say choosing a camera is difficult because there are so many on the market. Because it isn't a fanboy, therefore you don't need the comma, but it still fixes this comma splice. So please make sure that you are not making commas do things that they aren't supposed to do. This is a comma splice. All right, let's try this out. Where do the commas go? I have a phone charger with me at all times, yet I still can't seem to keep my phone alive. Right there, right before yet. Remember your cheat code, I have a phone charger with me at all times. That's a sentence. I still can't seem to keep my phone alive. That's a sentence. I've been friends with Jeff for a long time, but I'm starting to think he's turning into a big jerk. Right there, you've got a fanboy, and you've got a sentence on this side and a sentence on that side. Original Ken and Barbie dolls are highly desirable to toy collectors, but Kelly dolls tend to be less valuable. Right there. Now remember something, I don't want you to just put a comma before all of the fanboys. This "and" is joining Ken and Barbie as a compound subject. That's not the whole sentence. If you put a comma there, then you're saying original Ken is a whole sentence. That's not right. So the whole sentence is original Ken and Barbie dolls are highly desirable to toy collectors. That's a whole sentence. But Kelly dolls tend to be less valuable. That could be a whole sentence. Use the cheat code. You want something that could be a whole sentence over there and something that could be a whole sentence over there. But because we're joining them with a comma fanboy, now they are married into a whole sentence together. What could be two sentences have decided to get married. I can't go to school today because I have a bad fever. There's no commas here. The word because isn't a fanboy. It's not a coordinating conjunction. It doesn't need the help of a comma. Think of because it is longer, it doesn't need a fanboy comma arrangement to help it out because it is longer and it doesn't need the comma's help. Your mom is a really good host, but she tends to tell the same story over and over. It goes right there, sentence, or independent clause rather, comma, fanboy, independent clause. My brother's name is Derek and my sister's name is Helen. There's no commas in this, again, because the independent clauses are too short. You could have, my brother's name is Derek, period, my sister's name is Helen, making it two independent clauses. But this is one of those sentences I would say the independent clauses are short enough that you can get away without the comma. And again, if you're still stumped by that, just come up to one of the English teachers and we will help you with this. The independent clause is so short, what do I do? Kind of conundrum. I get that this is hard. Jack and Jill walked down the street and up the hill. Again, no commas. Up the hill isn't an independent clause. That's your hint. And I don't want you to just think you can put commas between and everything. So Jack and Jill, that's a compound subject. So you can't put just a comma wherever you want. And think about this. Up the hill, if you put a comma there and said that that was a comma fanboy, up the hill is a dependent clause, not an independent clause. So that would not be correct either. Henry can either go to GRCC for 2 years or he can go straight to Western Michigan. Right there. Independent clause, comma, fanboy, independent clause. I can go left or right. Again, just because there's a fanboy doesn't mean you need a comma. Right isn't an independent clause. If you just put right, that's not a sentence. That's not, it can't stand by itself and make sense. That's your cheat code. I didn't do my part of the project, so my group is really mad at me. Right there. I didn't do my part of the project. That could stand by itself. That could be a sentence. My group is really mad at me. That could be its own sentence. You've got a comma. You've got a fanboy. There you go. All right, I hope this has cleared up some stuff for you guys. Go through your vignettes, and really, I would start with highlighting all the fanboys that you have, and then ask yourselves, did you do this correctly? Use your cheat code. Can you go through and say that there is what could be its own sentence on one side and what could be its own sentence on the other? Is it an independent clause? Is it an independent clause? And then did you put a comma, fanboy? Thanks for watching.